A River Ran Wild by Lynn Cherry. Author's note. Long ago, a river ran wild through a land of towering forests. Bears, moose, and herds of deer, hawks and owls all made their homes in the peaceful river valley. Geese paused on their long migration and rested on its banks. Beavers, turtles, and schools of fish swam in its clear waters. One day, a group of native people, searching for a place to settle, came upon the river valley. From atop the highest mountain, they saw the river nestled in the valley, a silver sliver in the sun. They came down from the mountain, and at the river's edge they knelt to quench their thirst with its clear water. Pebbles shone up from the bottom. "Let us settle by the river," said the chief of the native people. He named the river Nash Away, which meant river with petal bottom. By the Nash Away, Chief Weewa's people built a village. They gathered cattails from the riverbank to thatch their dwellings. In the forest, they set fires to clear brush from the forest floor. In the clearings, they planted corn and squash for eating. They made arrows for hunting and canoes for river travel. When Chief Weewa's people hunted in the forest or caught salmon in the river, they killed only what they needed for themselves for food and clothing. They asked all the forest creatures that they killed to please forgive them. The Nashua people saw a rhythm in their daily lives. In the seasons, the river, the land, and the forest provided everything they needed. The Nashua had lived for generations by the clean, clear, flowing river, when one day a pale-skinned trader came with a boatload full of treasures. He brought shiny metal knives, colored beads, and cooking kettles, mirrors, tools, and bolts of bright cloth. His wares seemed like magic. The Nashua welcomed him, traded furs, and soon a trading post was built. In the many years that followed, the settlers' village and others like it grew, and the Nash Away became the Nashua. The settlers worked together to clear land by cutting down the forests, which they thought were full of danger, wildernesses that they wanted to conquer. They hunted wolves and beaver, killing much more than they needed. Extra pelts were sent to England in return for goods and money. The settlers built sawmills along the river, which the Nashua's current powered. They built dams to make the mill ponds that were used to store the water. They cut down the towering forests and floated tree trunks down the river. The logs were cut up into lumber, which was used for building houses. The settlers built fences for their pastures, plowed their fields, and planted crops. They called the land their own, and they told the Nashua people not to trespass. Hunting land disappeared, and the settlers cleared the forest. The Nashua's fishing rights vanished, and the settlers claimed the river. The Nashua's ways were disrupted, and they began to fight the settlers. The war raged for many years, but the Nashua's bows and arrows were no match against gunpowder, and so the settlers' rifles drove the Nashua people from the land. Through 100 years of fighting, the Nashua area was a healthy river, sometimes dammed for gristmills, but still flowing wild and free. Muskrats, fish, and turtles still swam from bank to bank. Deer still came to drink from the river, and owls, raccoons, and beavers fed there. At the start of the new century, an industrial revolution came to the Nashua River banks and waters. Many new machines were invented. Some spun thread from wool and cotton. Others wove thread into cloth. Some machines turned wood to pulp, and others made the pulp into paper. Leftover pulp and dye and fiber were dumped into the Nashua River, whose swiftly flowing current washed away the waste. These were times of much excitement, of much progress and invention. Factories along the Nashua River made things of new materials. Telephones and radios and other things were made of plastics. Chemicals and plastic waste were also dumped into the river. Soon, the Nashua's fish and wildlife grew sick from all the pollution. The paper mill continued to pollute the Nashua's waters. Every day for many decades, pulp was dumped into the Nashua River, and the pulp clogged up the river, began to run more slowly. As the pulp decomposed, Bad smells welled up from the river. People who lived near the river smelled its stench and stayed far from it. Each day, the mills dyed paper, red, green, blue, and yellow, and the Nashua River became whatever color the paper was being dyed. Soon, no fish lived in the river. No birds stopped on their migration. No one could see the pebbles shining up through the murky water. The Nashua was dark and dirty. The Nashua River was dying. One night, Owiana, a descendant of Wiwa who still lived by the Nashua, had a dream so vivid that he awoke in a wide-eyed wonder. In his dream, Chief Wiwa's spirit returned to the river and saw it as it was now, still and deadly. Chief Wiwa mourned for the Nasha Way, but where his tears fell upon the dirty waters, the water were cleansed until the river once again flowed freely. The next morning, Owiana went to speak to his friend Marian. When he told her of his dream, she said, "I had this dream also. River with Pebble Bottom is the name the Wiwa gave it, but today no pebbles shine up through the Nashua's river waters." Together, they decided something must be done. Marian traveled to each town along the Nashua River. She spoke of the river's history and her vision to restore it. No longer do we have a river, it's a stinking, smelly sewer. But it wasn't always this way. People listened and imagined a sparkling river full of fish. They imagined pebbles shining up through clear waters. They signed petitions and sent letters. They protested to politicians and showed them jars of dirty water. They convinced the paper mills to build a plant to process the waste. They persuaded the factories to stop dumping. Finally, new laws were passed, and the factories stopped polluting. Slowly, 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 the Nashua's current began to be clean with. Slowly, the Nashua's current began to clean its water. Year by year, the river carried away the dyes and the fiber to the ocean. Marian and Owiana thanked the people who had helped to clean the river. Through the meadows, towns, and cities, the Nashua River once again flows freely. Paper pulp no longer clogs it. Chemicals no longer foul it. Now we walk along its banks and row upon its fragrant waters. We can set our boats upon it, and with its current drift downstream. Once again, the river runs wild through a towering forest greenway. Red-tailed hawks and barred owls live here. Geese pause for their long migration and rest on the riverbanks. Deer come to drink from the river's water. We too have settled by the river. Pebbles shine up through the clear water. Nashua is what we call it, river with a pebble bottom. The end.